So today I participated in my very first kind of like hour alone experience or challenge, which kind of pushed me outside of my cultural comfort zone. And at first I was kind of unsure of what I should do for this challenge, so I just kind of began to wander around the streets of Maastricht to explore a little bit. And I eventually came upon this tourist information center, and so I decided to go inside. And I decided that, like, one way that I could kind of push myself out of my cultural comfort zone was to talk to one of the employees to find out if there were any places that I should visit or see that we hadn't really been to as a group. And I think that this task was important for me to do because I think everyone should really be able to ask for directions or guidance, especially when they're in a city or a country with which they're unfamiliar. And especially as a tourist, I think it's really valuable to hear about a place from locals or people who know a lot about it and to utilize the resources that you have to your benefit. So for instance, this was like an awesome resource that I could use, this information center, and it could, benefit my experience in this city that I'm not really familiar with. So as I walked in, I kind of picked up one of the maps and asked one of the employees for assistance. And I asked what she would recommend visiting and what would be open today and tomorrow, especially considering the fact that, both days are holidays. And she specifically recommended that I visit the older and more historic part of the city, which we had already visited as a group. But she also visited that I go to the Louvre Basilisk, which is the Our Lady of Assumption church. And this was one of the churches in the city that's actually like open to the public. And so I actually ended up taking her suggestion later and visiting the church, which was just breathtakingly beautiful. And I even got to light a candle, which was just like an awesome, awesome experience to see a church like that. And I was so glad that she had suggested that I do that because I wouldn't have known about it had she not, suggested it to me. I also asked her if she knew of any good restaurants that would be open tonight for dinner. And while she was kind of unsure of what would be open, she still suggested that I check out Rex Street, as it has great world cuisine. So she said that it has Thai food, tapas, burgers, Indonesian food, which all sounded really interesting to me. And then she also mentioned that I would find good restaurants on St. Peter Street as well. And while she was thinking of a place to recommend, she began speaking with a fellow employee in Dutch. And I'm assuming that she was just asking if there was anywhere that she would possibly suggest or, kind of trying to figure out what would be open. But I found myself feeling really kind of uncomfortable in this situation as I didn't understand what they were saying. And this kind of helped me to recognize how valuable it is to be fluent in multiple languages. But it also made me more aware of the fact that she could speak my language while I couldn't speak hers, and my expectation that she be able to understand and assist me and be able to speak in English. This instance also made me think about the relationship between language and one's identity. I found it interesting that while both women could speak fluent English, that they both felt more comfortable speaking in Dutch with one another. This to me demonstrates how one tends to speak in one's native language as it's most comfortable, but also how being able to speak in one's native language is an important part of, validating and maintaining one's identity. And this really reminds me of the importance of valuing a child's native language in the classroom as it's an important component of who they are and what their culture means to them. And I think that this will ultimately influence me to be a better teacher who is more culturally aware and more respectful of my students and who really validates, who they are as people, as language is a really important component of that. Overall, I think this challenge was outside of my cultural comfort zone in that I would normally not engage or interact with an employee in this manner. I would normally just resort to, looking up sites on the internet or like good restaurants on the internet or just using the map as a guide. It was nevertheless a bit safe, however, as it was in a fairly formal setting. So in the future, perhaps in a future hour alone challenge, I would love to interact with a Dutch native in a more informal context, perhaps simply just talking to someone on the street or sitting next to someone at a restaurant and engaging in conversation. From this experience, I learned about myself, specifically that I'm quite hesitant to kind of take the initiative and engage with strangers. I began my conversation with this really hesitant, like, do you speak English? And it kind of took me a few minutes of walking around the information center before I really gained the courage to ask for recommendations. Nevertheless, I hope that this challenge kind of helps prepare me to be more confident in interacting with those that I don't know and with those who are different from me. This experience was overall a really positive one, which I hope will encourage me to be more open to interacting with others in the future. This aligns with one of my personal goals for this study abroad trip, as I hope to become more comfortable in interacting with those who are different from me, so that I will eventually feel really comfortable and capable of doing this in my future classroom. And to just see like these type of interactions between me and people who are different from me as a really positive thing from which I can learn a great deal.